Welcome to the Epic Company Culture Podcast, where your host, Josh Sweeney, will give you, the business leaders, HR professionals, and company culture aficionados, the knowledge you need to take your company culture to the next level.
Hello, and welcome to the Epic Company Culture Podcast. Before we get started, I would like to thank Prototype Prime for this amazing podcast space. Today, we are joined by Hugh Massie from DNA Behavior. Hugh, thanks for coming in.
Josh, it's great to be with you.
Yeah, we appreciate you taking the time. So to get started off, tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization.
Well, for myself, I am actually a reformed accountant, which is quite an unusual career change from moving from the accountancy, corporate world, wealth management to a business that's in the field of behavioral sciences.
Nice. And tell us about DNA Behavior.
So DNA Behavior is a behavioral sciences firm, and what we have done is pioneered the development of some online behavioral management solutions to help businesses deliver very meaningful, customized experiences to their employees and clients. And we are particularly a leader in the field of behavioral finance, working in the wealth management industry to help a financial advisor understand their client, helping investors make better investment decisions. And just recently we've built quite a presence in what's called the financial wellness market, which is very interesting, which is all behavioral and getting people to think about money differently and change their behaviors in that area. But we also, Josh, do a lot of work in leadership development, team building, and I think this is where it's great that you're doing your work in Epic Culture, because I think at the end of the day, what we're both doing is trying to change the culture of business out there.
Yeah, definitely. And by having the behavior analytics, the personality assessments, all the information to go along with that, we can definitely understand why things happen based on personalities, and then understand how do we go, create the outcomes that we want. So, yeah.
Well, many people forget that the root cause of most business problems is human behavior, and I think if you can learn to get to the bottom of that and deal with it in a nice way, empathetic way, with listening, with respect, acceptance, then you can go a long way to actually solving the business problem.
Yeah, definitely. So let's talk about human behavior, some of your experiences, and dive into the cultural side of that. So my first question for you is, what is, other than your own organization, what is the most memorable, good company culture experience you had?
So the most memorable and good culture experience I had was actually in DNA Behavior itself. Mm-hmm. When very early on in the business, and we had developed the profile system, and one day I had a very awkward conversation with the COO of the business at the time, and we just sat there for an hour talking, and we both left the room really tired. And I went home and I was just exhausted. And I came back the next morning and I said, "Gary, how did you feel when you got home?" And he said, "I felt really tired." And I said, "Do you think it's that conversation we had yesterday?" And he said, "I think it could be." And what we did was, we had the profile system, and we had everybody's strengths and struggles and communication keys on little cards on their business card. So I said, "Pull out your business card and let's have a look at where this might have gone wrong." And particularly for me as the leader, I had to go first in this awkward conversation and be vulnerable myself. And I said, okay, so here's some of my strengths and struggles. And what I'd really done is, I'm a person who thinks about an ideas for a little while, and then I can bombard people with them and expect them to pick it up, understand it, and be ready to roll. And when I get someone who pushes back and starts contradicting me, it can become very energy draining. And then we looked at his my unique profile performance keys card at that time, and we could see that what I had done was just overwhelmed him. And so the cultural moment out of that came that what we agreed was, I will raise these ideas, but I'm going to give you 3 to 5 business days to go away and think about it, and then we'll have a conversation and I'll absorb your ideas and we'll get to the solution. And I learned to treat everybody uniquely inside the business and do that. And I think that's been a success formula for me, and I really do believe it's fundamental to the culture of our company, but also what I want others to be doing as well out there.
Yeah, definitely. I actually think I had one of those conversations the other day where it was like both exacerbated at the end and like, where did that go wrong,
Yeah.
And it's definitely communication and understanding, who are you communicating with? What is their style? What is my style? And we're very aware of those, but even with all of that awareness, it takes a lot of effort to make sure you communicate in that way.
The problem is Josh, you can be under pressure.
Yeah.
And then you lose yourself in your own style and you fail to become aware of others. And it's just the way it happens. And, the reality is most people give you grace for this to happen a few times, but it can't keep on happening. And that's where then, you see the workplace challenge of the employee doesn't want to work for their manager anymore because they don't like the way that they're communicated with. They don't feel like they've been respected or heard. They don't feel their talents are being used. And then they walk away. And it all starts with poor communication. And to me, we're having the culture conversation today. That's got to be a big pillar of building a great culture. There are many other things which we can get into, but that is a big one.
Definitely. So that was one of your most memorable experiences in what you do and in your organization. What's an experience that kind of left the biggest negative culture impression in maybe one of your past roles?
Yeah, well, it's in one of my past roles, and it's very memorable when I worked in the big corporate world in a big four accountancy firm. I was still pretty young, and I can remember partners at the time just working me into the ground and then yelling at me, why haven't I got this? And I said, guys, I've just worked 18 hours every day this week for you, and you're yelling at me to get more out of me. What's going on here? And it was really more the abusive. It was quite regular, and it was quite an abusive environment. And I think that creates quite a toxic culture, and then it builds politics up with it, and there's bullying involved. And that was really, at the end of the day, what sort of got me to question my own passion and want to leave. I thought, okay, if everybody around me is miserable and everybody else is dealing with this nonsense, why be here? If no one's got a smile on their face when they're at work, it's not a good place to be.
Yeah, definitely. Was there an experience you had in other roles prior to DNA that you said, when you built DNA, you said, I want to make sure we do that? Like some experience you had in another company where you wanted to make sure to bring it over into your organization?
Well, I think if I took that experience that I had in the accountancy world as one that's very, very clearly there, and and I still mix with a lot of these people. I think I left before I caused there to be damaged relationships. But I look at that and I feel when I go and see accountancy firms now, and we're working with quite a big accountancy firm at the moment here in Atlanta, and I look at, okay, if everybody can just be understood for who they are, and that's our goal with them is to adapt the communication, like I talked about in the story with Gary.
Right.
That's what I want to see every business, and I really want to see it happen in a few accounting and professional services firms, because they are quite harsh environments, but they could be softened up a lot and people are a lot happier if you do this.
Yeah, that makes sense. What, from a company culture perspective in DNA, what is the kind of the biggest challenge you're having, or the thing you're most looking forward to enhancing in the future?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. So, we've defined our culture around know, engage, and grow, and I think we've done a good job at understanding everybody inside the business, what their talents are, where they should be, what meeting environments they cope with or not cope with, what tasks they should be doing. So we've done a pretty good job with that. I mean, even then, still occasionally in hiring, we all make a mistake. You can be fooled, or it's just not someone's passion. And I think that's something that we've done a great job at. We actually exited somebody yesterday, not because they were a bad person or weren't trying, but we knew it wasn't their passion, and this was hard work for everybody. But I think we've done a good area in that, a good job in that. I think the building steps really now are, in terms of the culture, are probably more around execution. So we've got the code word we now use called SEAM, which is simple, easy. So it's simple, easy, actionable, meaningful, and measurable. So it's SEAM with 2 M's.
Okay.
And everything is built around that. So all the company processes, so we're doing a lot of work, believe it or not, to simplify everything down. And if that can't happen, it's got to be removed.
Got it.
And I think that's what we live by, because if the processes we have in the business are too complex for the employees and the team members, they'll get disenfranchised and want to leave. If they're too complex for the clients, they want to leave too. Right. So that's sort of pivotal. But I think it's the second level of building the culture inside the company after the know, engage, and grow. There's more things we're doing as well. We've always had it, but I'm emphasising it more in that we have more of what I call a quality life policy, which is built into everybody's employment contract. So if you've been in the company a year, you get a trip to a place that is of meaning to you that you may not otherwise get to do. So the company pays for you to go.
Nice.
And you get a few days off to do it, and then you get some time off to go and do one philanthropic exercise each year for up to 3 days.
Very cool. What are some of the best experiences they've come back with? Like, what are the trips that were memorable?
For one, it was it was a cruise. For others, it was another. For another, it was climbing a mountain that he'd never in the Rockies that he wanted to climb, going up one of the mountains in Washington State. So it's things like that. For another, she'd never been to New York and wanted to go to a particular art gallery. It's things like that. We haven't sent anybody to the moon yet, or
not yet.
I haven't sent anybody down. I've sent a couple of them down to Australia for implementations, but it wasn't a quality life trip.
Right.
But those days are coming. I think they all know it's there, and I think it's a good incentive to write down a list for yourself of what do you want to get out of your life and what do you want to do. And can the company help you do one of them? I think that was really what the exercise that we've got everybody to do was. Yeah, and then they've got to come to the office and show photos and the whole experience. So it's not just you do it and you get reimbursed. It's a full show.
So maybe instead of the traditional watch at 10 years, they get the Virgin Galactic flight or something. Right?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, but I've got to go. I've got to go first.
You gotta test it, make sure it's safe.
Yeah, I got to make sure it's safe. But that's exactly the type of thing that you need to do for people, because I think it's giving them. Look, we all want a bonus, right? We all need more money, but at a certain point, you can't compete in the marketplace with that. And actually, I think in this day and age, particularly with millennials, they want time and flexibility and life experiences. Yeah. And it's not about having the most money.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So as far as the exercise, do y'all go through any formal exercise to help people map out what they really want out of work and life? Or is that just something you came up with, or how does that work? Yeah,
this is something that I came up with just reading a lot of books out there, and being an entrepreneurs organization like you are as well, Josh. You see these things going on out there and you think, okay, how could I implement that? And so I just took what I thought was good that I had seen out there, and I thought I believe the exercise of writing it down is really important. So I've got everybody, got them to read a book, and then they write it down, mm-hmm. and then at various points during the year when we do some team meetings, we discuss what some of those are, and then we say, okay, well, next year, as long as you stay,
right,
you get to go and do that.
Nice.
And that's really as far as it goes. But they've got to come back and do a presentation, show us all the pictures, and involve everybody in the exercise. So it's not just taking it.
Yeah. And what's the book?
Well, the book's now the name of the book's just suddenly escaped my memory. And it's got a purple cover, and it's not very long. It's sort of a fable type story written by a person who writes very similarly to Patrick Lencioni. It's actually an Australian guy who wrote it, but the name of it has just temporarily disappeared.
Awesome. So as far as company culture is concerned, what else have we not asked you about that's near and dear to your heart?
I think we perhaps haven't talked about the importance of it, because culture is a big word. I think it's a word that's misunderstood a little bit too.
How's that?
And in that, I think a lot of people play it out as values, but I think it's more than values. It's also the actions. It's the way in which the company is designed, the way in things are done. I think values are an important part of it in the company, to have values and to infiltrate or impact the decision making. But I think culture is still is a higher level. I think it's a higher level than just leadership as well. A company can have a good leader, but and have a set of values. But I think culture is still something intangible above that. But I think it's the whole knitting of, the leadership, the values, the belief, the vision, and also the processes to outlive it. Because you can have a very inspiring leader or a very inspiring market segment that you're going to go and chase after, and to do the play bigger game type thing,
right,
and have a strategy. But if the culture isn't right there, then all of that will fail. And so I think that the piece that's so important with the culture is the people, but it's how the people are treated. It's all the business processes, it's the decisions that are made around that, and it becomes that, that fibre of the organisation. Because if that's not there, the business will never sustain itself. People are not going to want, I think this is where it gets to it being important, that people aren't going to want to come and work for you. The clients aren't going to want to come.
Right.
Now, we've always used the slogan, understanding people before numbers. We let it go for a few years, but I regret that. Because whilst it's not the culture definition that we use of know, engage and grow, understand people for numbers is really what we're about. And that being deployed in every process and ensuring that is there throughout, internally and externally, is really important. But I think the companies, if you want to bring this down to the hard stuff, the results side, because people can say, well, culture's soft. But the businesses that get the higher multiple, that do better in the end, that are more profitable, have a very strong company culture.
Right.
And it's something very intangible about that business in the way it works. A little bit of it's from the founder, a little bit of it's all the people inside it. But I think it comes down to fundamentally how you operate, how you manage the people is very important. You can look at Uber out there.
Right.
Great strategy. It's been a success story, but it's got a rotten culture.
Right.
That at some point could kill the company.
Yeah.
Whether that is another competitor that comes in. In 10 years' time, will Uber be there or will there be a replacement? We'll see. But the culture has got to be strong if it's going to be, the company's going to last a long time, and the employees and the customers trust it.
Yeah, definitely. Going back to your mention of like culture being this soft item, I mean, that's something we've spoke about before where, in a lot of ways, some people look at it very results driven, fast paced people tend to look at it and see, well, it's soft because it's this touchy feely kind of aspect of people and knowing what they want. But on the flip side, I mean, a company culture of setting goals and holding people accountable for goals, a company culture of a meritocracy where, you only move up based on your merits, right? That's part of culture too. And there's nothing really soft about it. And the soft side of that may be, yes, you still have to interact and motivate people to hit those goals. You still have to motivate those people to grow and, create, hit those, achieve that meritocracy or, the goals that they need.
And I think this comes up, there's a number of points to make around this, that often the very results-driven people and bottom line people, which, Josh, you and I both have the propensity to be that, can just stay stuck in that because it's easier for us to do that. We don't have to deal with human emotions. It's just easy to be rational and say, well, the number on the page says all the story, and move on and make very rational, if not at times brutal, decisions. And, as you and I have talked about, a little bit of patience at times is necessary. But that doesn't mean that you don't have to make the hard decisions at times, because you do. And I don't think this means that culture is soft, because I think it's actually hard. And I'm not meaning just hard to build, but there's a really hard side to it, as you just said, in terms of defining the goals, holding people accountable. But the way I've been brought to dealing with this is to realise that to be successful, there is a balance of results and relationships. Mm-hmm. And what I have learned is that if you can build better relationships, which really a fundamental part of that is listening to people and being more empathetic in your approach, ultimately you're going to get better results. And so for us people as leaders who are results driven, that's our challenge, is to soften up a little bit and be more relational in that approach. And if we really can't do that, then it's to bring somebody into the business to work with us who can do that, but is probably just strong enough to handle us.
Right.
But they're the person that's more relational, at managing everybody inside the business. But you've got to have that balance inside the business, otherwise it won't exist. But sometimes, being relational is also offering up tough love. Yeah. It's not all just cuddly stuff and going out to lunch and talking and going to holidays and messing around at the water fountain and sitting on the sofa or a couch. It's down to business stuff in there too.
Yeah, I would think there's a level of kind of honesty and respect to some tough love, right? If somebody has the relationship and the trust with you that you can share or they can share with you the tough love, that's when something good's happening. Because if you can't share that, then it's still very surface level, right? You don't have that level of communication you need.
So, there's a couple of answers to that. Leaders, and it's all at the end of the day does come from the leadership. The leader has to learn to become personally vulnerable. And that's a really hard thing to do for the initiator, influencer type leader that's potentially a bit more closed in their personality. They're a little bit more guarded. They're a little bit more concerned about dabbling in human emotions. But, if you can reveal something of yourself, even occasionally admit a mistake with your team, that goes so far in building trust. And so that's a really key thing to be able to learn to do. I don't know you have to go 100% of the way in doing that, because there's a point where that might be being a bit too naive. But if you can just take that first step forward and admit that you're wrong, and I've seen this work very successfully with customer problems as well. Okay, my company did screw up. It made a mistake, and we're going to rectify it this way, and you address that honestly. It usually works out okay. Now, if you keep doing it, right, that's a different problem.
That's a different challenge,
right? That's a different problem. But I think the other part is being authentic. And so people will trust you. They might say, okay, Hugh or Josh is hard, and we know he's not going to buckle on that, but at least we know where we stand.
Right.
And I think it's the leader which is a bit flimsy in that area, and you don't know where you stand, and they're just always weaving around and negotiating, and their answer one day is this and the next day it's that, without any fundamental reason for the change. That's a real problem.
Yeah, definitely.
Directness, but saying it nicely is the best way.
Yeah, I definitely have I have a lot of respect for the candid knowing where people stand, because it's just not a lot of bureaucracy, not a lot of political or positioning, situations. It's like, at least I know what the expectation is. It's extremely clear. Yeah, so I enjoy those.
Yeah, I think knowing expectations is the big thing, and the clearer you are about your business, what's expected, how it's going to work, the more of that can happen.
Yeah, fantastic. Is there anything else you would like to share with us?
No, I can't think of anything offhand. Okay. You've asked probably the big questions. I think that, but at the end of the day, culture is king, and really I believe that's the next movement out there. I think leadership's important, but I think we've got to go to the next level above that. And how do we deliver within the culture a customized experience for each employee and customer inside the business? I truly believe that's the holy grail of this, and the more we can do that in our own business, but also help others bring that into their business, then the better off we're all going to be.
Yeah, most definitely. I like the idea of that customized per person experience. So thank you for joining us on the podcast.
That's a pleasure, Josh. It's great to do this.
Thank you. This has been an interview with Hugh Massie from DNA Behavior. Thank you for joining the Epic Company Culture Podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the Epic Company Culture Podcast with Josh Sweeney. If you enjoyed this content, please subscribe on iTunes, SoundCloud, or Stitcher. For additional content and transcripts, visit epicculture.co. If you have questions or topics you would like us to address or expand on, tweet us at epicculture1 or email at podcast@epicculture.co.